Hi there, and welcome to the Future Makers podcast by MAND. This is where we talk to people from scientific and high-tech organizations with a purpose. I'm Angina Herman, and Aveli Idavain is hiding under the hood to make sure everything runs. Say hi to everyone, Ave.
Hello, everyone.
Today we get to speak with Chloé Carrière, an entrepreneur, a space influencer, and a science communicator. Welcome, Chloé.
Hi, Angina. Hi, Heavily. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us, Chloé, why does your company Galactic Studios exist?
Well, to start off, I think it's been existing for just a month, so it's quite new. But the idea has been there for quite a few years. I've been a science communicator for 3 to 5 years under the nickname of Galactic Chloé, and with the experience, I really realized what um, the gap that exists between society and science, and what we need to be doing to try to create this link of trust with society and between society and scientists, let's say. So the idea of creating a company that would be, not only myself, but other science communicators, other projects that have the similar goal has emerged last year. And so this year I decided to take the next step and actually create it. And so now it's called Galactic Studios, as you said. And we aim to bridge the gap between science and society.
So why does that gap need to be bridged? Why does society need to know about science?
Well, I think the main example that comes to mind that is extremely recent is the COVID pandemic, right? I mean, it's something that we've all lived quite differently, but it's where we've realized the importance of science and science communication for social matters. I mean, in Switzerland, for instance, I think we're one of the European countries where we are the less vaccinated. There were a lot of miscommunication on vaccination, the way it works. Actually, the recent Nobel Prize, I don't know if you've seen in medicine, has gone to the technology that it was used for COVID vaccines. And it seems that the way scientists are presented in the media has really fragilized this link with society. Now, people don't trust what science is saying because during COVID, it changed all the time. But that's also the way science works. So I think that's one of the main examples why we need to bridge that gap. And especially in Europe, there are not a lot of actors in this area. Whereas if you go to the other side of the ocean, I think in the United States, they are much more into these types of industry and realize maybe also more the use of communication in these fields.
So how do you plan to do that? What's your, I don't know, business plan or a great master plan for the future?
Well, the world is changing all the time. There are new digital tools that are arising, like social media. I mean, the world was very different 20 years ago, and a lot of jobs didn't exist 20 years ago. Like, for instance, the one of influencers. Influencers, so maybe when I say this word, you have in mind someone that is selling cream or clothes and is on the beach somewhere on an island. But it's what I mean by influencers is people that are able to influence us in the way that we consume things, for instance. And a lot of people now are taking their information through social media, but not through media or journalists, but through these celebrities, personalities, influencers. So they don't only influence the way we consume, they also influence the way we think and the way we gather our information. And I truly believe that the business model that is behind can be applied to other more maybe meaningful purposes like science. So why not develop scientific influencers who are, first of all, legit to be talking about science, influence the public in a positive way through science, in the way we consume, in the way we act, in the way we face the global challenges of tomorrow, and use similar techniques. So, I mean, it goes through sponsoring with companies. This is what I do sometimes to select, you know, precise partnerships because I don't want to be selling salsa cream or anything, but linked to science, linked to space technology is also in my field to communicate that. Then you also have a lot of public funding that goes into science communication. But usually, this public funding is going to researchers who don't necessarily have the expertise or the means to do meaningful communication. So also position the company and myself into the bridge between those actors and society and the way, production works, to make sure that we have meaningful impact in this area, for instance.
Okay, so you have a YouTube channel. You've already had one for a long time. You had this Galactic Chloé show at EPFL where you studied. You also have a little radio segment in the French-speaking national radio. What else are you doing? Or tell us a bit more about your daily work and where we can see more of you.
Well, my day is it's not a routine; like it changes all the time. For now, as I said, so I am an entrepreneur because I'm creating the company from scratch. So I'm learning about accounting, I'm learning about HR, I'm learning about, as you said, how to build a business model. What would be the competitors in that sense? Like where can I learn from on aspects that I don't know about, because maybe I haven't said it, but I am an engineer at first. I'm not into the communication industry at all. I just learned by doing. I'm in the scientific world. So those are kind of the tasks that I try to do throughout the last month and in the coming ones. And then, as you said, it's a lot of content creation to build a community around platforms such as Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, to, people are aware of what I'm doing. And also, as I said, doing science communication. It's meeting also a lot with people I've worked with previously that were interested, in developing, for instance, trainings to become science communicators for students or for researchers or other media in Europe. It's also about, working. You said I work on the radio for a national broadcaster in Switzerland. So how can we include science in a smart way into content that is, let's say, already existing media, and not creating a different media like a YouTube channel or other influencers? And yes, and a lot of traveling, actually. The
Mm-hmm.
traveling around France and Switzerland, but I actually have a lot of shootings for videos that are either linked to space or sciences. I also work with a company in Paris for ecological transformation. I am also expecting a baby, so I have a lot of medical appointments that goes into the mix. But so that's what I say. There's not a day that is the same. Let's say.
So, in your experience, how have you? So, you are coming from the scientific and engineering world yourself. So, you know the people, you know the mindset. And I think traditionally, science has, at least in my opinion, more of a serious image. It's kind of, I don't know, people want to be very, like, you have to have rigor and it needs to be very, you don't throw in jokes or personal stuff. You have to have this sort of, I don't know, a distance, whereas you clearly you have a much more personal touch, and you use the phrase space influencer. That's already, like, it's not something you see a lot. So how have you been accepted or met in the scientific community with your approach?
Now that's a good question. I think as you mentioned, so I come from the scientific world. I arrived in Switzerland when I was a student in physics and as a bachelor student, and then I went to management of technologies. And my career as a science communicator kind of evolved in parallel of my student life. So I was trained and mentored by a lot of people in the fields of science, of course, but that really saw the impact and the importance of science communication. So I think that was great. Like, for instance, one of the most important part of my career was when EPFL, my university, asked to co-create together a YouTube channel to interview scientists on campus, students, member of the administrations, to put forward the human aspect of the, as you said, the scientist, the image that we may have, and not only the science. So thanks to this, I think it gave me kind of the credibility and the legitimacy to as a science communicator. Then, as you say, the influencer kind of aspect is something that is very new and it's very connotated in a bad way. So
Mm.
sometimes I really need to understand what I mean by that. And as you say, in science, we think neutrality, neutral evaluation of the facts. And of course, I mean, that's the scientific methodology, and that's a good thing. But I believe if you want to touch people that are not interested in science at first, then we need to go through different channels. Because, for instance, doing an open door at a university, that's not really outreach, right? Because if
Mm.
people are not interested in science, they're not going to come.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to find new ways of touching these people, because those are the people that are also making the choices every day that are super important for our society. So by that, I mean, we need to go through emotions. What do you remember from yesterday? What do you remember from, the last movie you saw, the last exhibition, or even the last scientific conference? You go where you have emotions. It can be surprise, it can be curiosity, interest, and influencing people is building this link of trust with them through showing who you are, then bringing the science through different emotions. So through what you said, personal stories or jokes or channels like this, but it's not through very, let's say, clear and neutral scientific writing that we are able to do that, I think. Or at least that what I believe is that.
Mm.
I really like how you talk about the word influencer, because I also struggle with this so much, because I follow so many experts on social media who are either in gender studies or astronomy or cosmology or political science. And then every time when I start talking about them, I'm like, oh, there's this guy on TikTok that makes really good videos. It immediately kind of brings down the expertise of the person, whereas they are experts in their field using social media in a really clever way.
No, definitely. And I think this is an image that needs to change, right? Because um, whatever we think about what they're doing,
Yeah.
it's working. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the business plan is working. They have a huge influence on the next generation, the way that
Hmm.
they think. So either we criticize and just don't understand and that's it, or either we try to be as smart in some sense as them and use the same way of working to try to have a good influence. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Absolutely.
For me, the point about emotions is a crucial one. So that's something, well, both Ave and I for sure believe in, that you have to have emotions to get through to people. But there's also the dark side of it, that you don't only use positive emotions. Well, I think you do, Chloe, but a lot of players in the world, in society, use also negative emotions and fear in particular. And we see a lot in politics, but I think also in science communication, when we talk about things like climate change or pandemic topics like that. So have you given it thought, like, is it your brand to be strictly positive and optimistic, or how do you deal with the negative side of emotions?
I wouldn't say it's my brand. I'd say it's who I am. And I think that's also something that is crucial in science communication, that I believe is for the message to be successfully heard, let's say, it needs to be authentic. So
Hmm.
it's not about playing or acting. I'm not an actor. So the way I am on social media is just who I am. So
Hmm.
I'm a positive person. That's true. I'm clearly a positive person. People depict me a lot as smiling and everything is always good. Um, in terms of negative emotions, I think it's important to acknowledge them, right? I mean, the world, it's okay to be scared sometimes about the way, as you said, the world is evolving. Climate change is also something that is scary. But then I really liked during the ceremony where I was handed my diploma at EPFL just a month back. The president said that the line between optimism and pessimism is trust. So we need to trust in our abilities to face these challenges. And so that's the message that I'm trying to push forward.
So that sort of also answers another question that I had, was that you are a very you bring your personality into play. So this is really, for you, it's about authenticity I presume that you talk a lot about your private experiences as well, and that's one of the reasons why you feel so approachable. I mean, I first heard you speak at an event where you talked a lot about your career and how you made a lot of different starts. You studied physics, and then you had some struggle with it, and you dreamed about working at ESA, and then you did, and it wasn't as good as you wanted. So you've been very vulnerable about failing and changing your mind. And so is this I presume this is also because that's who you are and not so much a strategy to, I don't know, make yourself liked by everyone in the world.
Well, I hope not. It's true that I talk about my personal experiences, but it's also because that's the type of message I've heard from other people that have made me grow, helped me grow. So I believe, like, for instance, as you said, I talked about negative experiences and the way it impacted me, and it can inspire people to do the same thing. I think for me it was the same. Um, For instance, I can share a story that I think I didn't mention at this event. So,
Ooh.
2 years ago, I had an accident at home where I lost my left eye. So I opened up my fridge, and it was at Christmas time, and a bottle of champagne dropped on the floor. It exploded, and a piece of glass went into my left eye. So I think it was one of the scariest moments of my life, and so I was brought out of the hospital. I was extremely lucky to be uh, next in Lausanne, really next to a hospital that is specialized in ophthalmology, so eye surgery, and they managed to save it. And now, after a couple of surgeries, I see 30% out of my left eye, which is amazing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you would have seen the accident, I mean, I would have probably lost the eye. And now, I live differently, and it's been complicated, but now I mean, I feel like a normal person, and it helped me also change the way I see life in some sense. And I think the way I have behaved and sharing personal experience has been extremely impacted by this event. Because
Mm-hmm.
after this event, I decided I learned so much about, how the eye works and the way we perceive
Mm-hmm.
the world, that I decided to do science communication around that. So I did an interview on the YouTube channel that I had with EPFL with my surgeons. I did a science
Uh-huh.
communication video on how the eye works and how light, is interpreted by our brain, linking it to what the surgeries that I had. And this had a better impact than just, talking about it out of nowhere to people. So that's also why I think people can, as you said, when you have emotions, even if in this case those were not good emotions,
Mm-hmm.
people related. There was empathy behind it, and so maybe they listened to it a bit more, and the message went through. And I think I didn't expect that, but one of the people that were following me that I didn't know told me once that thanks to this video, they changed their minds about organ donation.
Oh, really?
Because the next step would be that I could get a cornea transplant. And it's something that is very difficult to get, especially in Switzerland, where the organ donation is not by default. It's the other way around. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, if you compare it to France or I think most European countries. So this is as well where you can see the impact of personal plus science communication on society, because that's a social aspect, I guess.
Nice. That's a pretty scary story. Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that will make a difference. And congrats on turning it around into
Thank you.
something relatable.
But maybe to answer your question, yes, I don't think that this is like a strategy, or maybe it is in some way, because that was the first personal event that I shared more publicly. But
Mm-hmm.
thanks to this, I realized the power of the story of what happens in your life, how people relate, and then the impact in the end on what they think can happen, how it can change everything, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, do you have a specific audience in mind that you're speaking to? So, at EPFL, I suppose you were talking mostly to your fellow students, but now that you're expanding and you have a national audience by now, international actually, in France as well, and any content you make in English. So do you target somebody in specific, or are you essentially just trying to inspire anyone who runs into your content?
Well, then I think now we're talking about strategy, because if you want to
True.
succeed, if you want to succeed on those platforms, yes, you need to have a target audience. Otherwise, it's not going to work out very well.
Mm-hmm.
So for the myself, I mean Galactic Chloé, as I said, I'm mostly doing either English on Instagram, or YouTube is in French, and TikTok as well. So the audience is kind of different. Instagram, I'm really addressing, I'd say, more internationally, because I talk a lot about my path on also as an entrepreneur. For YouTube, it's more really true science communication in French, as I said. So more for the France plus French speaking part, Switzerland, Belgium. And then LinkedIn, for instance, that's a professional network, right? So it's really more international. It's also not the same way of communicating. With the company, I'm working also a lot with children. So that's more workshops going into schools. And then, of course, you also adapt the way you're talking to. So I guess the question is it depends on the project. I like
Yeah.
addressing to new audiences, but I think what I prefer is targeting audiences that, are not expecting science or are not interested in science at first. That's really the main challenge. And language is also a barrier, right? I think in communication there is this notion of culture that is important. Probably wouldn't listen to, for instance, a German type of video, because the culture is just different than the French speaking part. So in Switzerland we have 3 different national languages. I don't know if you know it, but Italian, German, and French, and actually a 4th one, but it is up in the mountains. It's a very, very targeted audience. So it's interesting to see already the cultural differences in the way we communicate in those different parts.
I'm curious, what are the differences between French and German cultures? They seem so similar. They're right next to each other in Europe.
Oh, right. I mean, that would be a personal perspective. I don't want to talk in generalities or stereotypes, because I mean that's not my field, right? But there is maybe I can already see, to give you an example, that I would be more comfortable talking about the difference between France and Switzerland, because I don't speak German, and I'm on the German side. So, but for instance, already between France and Switzerland, French speaking part, I can see cultural differences. So for instance, in France, we have much more this culture of personalities. We have celebrities. We have one president that is the image of the country. We have a lot of TV animators, influencers, as we said, also on social media, that are in France. In Switzerland, it's very different. Maybe if I ask you, can you give me the name of a Swiss celebrity? You'll be Roger Federer, with he's a
Exactly.
tennis man. And then you'll be like, I don't know, they're not so much. The political system is also very different. We don't have one president. We have 7 as a council, and each one of them will become president for only a year. And so there is a rotation. And these people go to the grocery store. They take the train. There is less this culture, of the president, or this celebrity. So the way we communicate is already pretty different, because people are, let's say, maybe more normal than in France, where we can have this hierarchy that we feel. So for instance, if you take the example of the way TV works in France, we're gonna go into big shows, etc., which is something that is a bit less the case in Switzerland. So that's what I mean by the differences.
So what does it mean for you, since you are communicating both to French and Swiss audiences? Does it make it easier to speak to the Swiss, that they don't have this celebrity culture and you can be sort of on eye level with them? Or is it harder because they don't, I don't know, understand what you're trying to do?
No, I think it's an opportunity, because there's also why I decided. I'm French originally. I'm not Swiss. I came to Switzerland 7 years ago. Well, now my husband is Swiss, etc. So we implanted here, but I could have decided to create the company on the French side. But there, to be honest, I don't know any actors located in Switzerland. Swiss people consume French content because it's the same language. But it's true that I think this message of, as I was saying, authenticity is something that touches more the Swiss public, because you don't play a role, you don't act as someone else. And on social media, usually it's always this same strategy of being authentic. But I think with the Swiss people, it truly makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Have you noticed any difference in acceptance of scientific content? So does it matter, do the French or the Swiss, are they more, which one is more interested in science, or is there really any difference in those attitudes?
To be honest, I think I couldn't say, because I haven't run like a specific study on this. That's a scientist in me talking. I would probably need to run different experiments to be able to answer this. Globally, I think the interest is mostly the same, in the sense that there is a portion of society that is educated, that speaks English, that has access to maybe different schools, types of universities, types of content that another part of society just doesn't. And so the question is, the challenge is the same on both borders. It's about how do we touch and target these people that maybe need it the most.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is so much content available in English, and now I feel a dab of guilt because we're producing our content also in English, but well,
But
we
you know
do
what?
go for the
That's
international audience.
exactly, that's a super difficult question that I am struggling with. I mean, when I started as a science communicator, a lot of the things where I was doing were in English, because, I mean, as I told you already, if you want to target the whole Swiss audience, you don't have any choice. It has to be in English, because otherwise you're only targeting one part of the country. But in another sense, if you do it in English, then I'm not going to target the little kid, or the person that is not
Yeah.
doesn't have this education. So that's why I also have implemented different strategies depending on the channel that I use. So I know I can have this impact on this type of audience, but still also remain a bit international. And as you said, that's also the goal.
I've been speaking a lot. Ave, do you have anything that you want to ask before I continue on with my battery of questions?
I have a few questions. What I started to think about was that in academia, they even say that the language of science is English. If you're not publishing in English, you're not publishing, which seems like, well, in terms of science communication, you might be screwing yourself over a little bit, because it's harder to reach people who don't necessarily grasp everything in English.
Definitely. And I mean, for this, I agree, because when you're publishing a paper, who is your target audience? It's not the general public. I mean, I was reading papers for my radio part tomorrow about nucleation in chemistry. And when I do, for instance, when I research something and I'm going to do it in French, for instance, the radio is in French, I always search in English, because I
Yeah.
know the papers are in English, and then I translate it in French. But that's fine, because the target audience, you read a paper on nucleation. No, no general public that is not interested in science at first is going to read it, right?
Yeah.
And so the target audience is more researchers across the world. And then, yes, we need to have a common language for that.
That makes sense. And what I also wondered was, since we talked about influencers, do you have a few favorite influencers that you follow and that you would like to recommend to our audience and to me? Because I'm always looking for new people to follow and understand.
Well, we haven't really talked about it. I've talked a lot about science, but I mean, my heart goes to space at the beginning. I mean, I'm a space enthusiast. I arrived as a physicist to study astrophysics. Then I went to space technologies, and I mentioned, my nickname is Galactic Chloé, so my content is mostly space related. Then with the company, the aim is to open up to science more in general, and that's what I'm doing also with the radio. So most of the people that I have to recommend are mostly space, but I'm happy. So I think the first one that I really discovered and enjoyed was the American influencer, the Space Gal. So she was an MIT graduate, and she notably has a science show on Netflix for kids.
Ooh, okay.
It's called Emily's Wonderland. And what I really enjoy with her, so I identify a lot with the way she communicates. So she's very positive. She's a mother. She puts forward science, but also a bit of the private aspects, and is trying to get society to move forward. So that's someone that I really recommend. Then actually, that's funny because the names that come to mind are mostly women. But that's
That's
good.
not
Nice.
a bad thing.
That's funny. There is another American woman that went to space just a few days ago. I don't know if you followed that. She's called Kelly Gerardi,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
she flew with Virgin Galactic. She with the first, I think it was industry sponsored flight. So the idea was to do scientific research, not just tourism, but with the industry sponsored, let's say, space flight. So I actually know also the scientific the institution that was behind the experiments that she was doing, but that was really great also to see someone, let's say, not into an international or governmental institution being able to fight a space.
Yeah.
And she is like really more into the influencer vibe. I'd say she's doing less science communication but more into inspiration of women in STEM. She also has a little girl, so she puts forward some mother-daughter relationship. So yes. And
Nice.
then, no, I don't know. I can keep going. It's true that on the European side, I don't have so much women that come to mind. There are a couple of accounts that I think of that I've shared actually on Instagram yesterday. MLA Astro or Space Explorer W. There are young women also trying to do science communication. But then on YouTube, for instance, the people that I follow on the French side are mostly men. So Science Étonnante, for instance, I have a friend also doing science exploration called Antoine versus Science. So it's more difficult to find, I think, women, especially in the space sciences field.
Interesting.
Mm.
Thanks for those. I think we're going to have to add links to the show notes so people can easily
Yeah, I can
find these
send
people.
maybe. Yeah, I can send the
That'll be
names
awesome.
afterwards.
Great, great. I wondered, yeah, you mentioned another influencer with the little child. You yourself made quite the jump. You quit your job and started a company while pregnant. Where did the courage come for that? That seems like almost a crazy thing to do.
Yeah, it is. I mean, most people, most of my friends were like, "That's crazy." Um, to come back to the accident that I was mentioning that happened 2 years ago, I think it made me become a different person in a sense that when something like this happens, you realize that life is really hanging by a string. It can change from one day to the other. In my on my side of things, it was just sight. That's fine, and you can live without sight, but it changes a lot of things for you. Um, and so I realized that there is no. You shouldn't be unhappy. You shouldn't be unfulfilled, no matter what. And so this is something that is really has driven me. I mean, when you mentioned very quickly my experience at the European Space Agency, that was my dream to go there. I quickly realized that all right, it's shiny, it's ESA or it's NASA, it's very beautiful from the outside, but if you don't feel fulfilled working there, then what would you do it? I mean, that's kind of the philosophy that I've applied to life. And so when I started this job, which was nice, I mean, it was a nice job. It was not like I was unfulfilled, but I didn't see myself working there for the next years. And I was kind of thinking to myself, oh, wow, all these studies, all this hard work, internships, having best grades for this moment, well, I don't like it. I don't feel it. So, yes, the pregnancy was also a risk to take when I decided to quit. But to be honest, I think it was also a push forward because what image do I want to give to my child? And yes, what image do I want to give to my child, and what kind of mother do I want to be? Do I want to be a fulfilled mother that okay, maybe a bit less present because I'll be traveling around the world doing science communication and showing him a lot of things, or do I want to be kind of stuck in this work that brings me financial stability but just doesn't isn't it for me?
So is this another sign of you choosing trust in between pessimism and optimism, that you have this trust in being able to have a fulfilling future without having to have an extensive safety net around you?
Yes, I guess I haven't really thought about it this way, but now that you say it, it's true. And but I have to say I am privileged. I mean, I was privileged enough to be able to make this choice because I had a bit of money on the side that I knew I could take the risks for a few months. I had this experience as a science communicator for the past 2 to 3 years, so I knew there was a business that could made out of it. So I mean, I didn't live everything from one day to the next without thinking ahead, but it's true that it was a difficult decision.
Yeah, I relate to that. I mean, of course, I'm significantly older than you are. Oh my goodness, I feel very old now. But I mean, I also recently left my day job to really go all in with the Mand agency, and it was. I mean, I
Congratulations.
loved my jobs. Thank you. I've had very good and very fulfilling jobs, and they have been very much building me towards what I'm doing now. But it was still like it. It was a big decision to make, to really believe that, okay, for the first time in my life, I will not be getting a fixed sum at the end of a month, guaranteed, at least until somebody fires me or something. So it's, yeah, it's
Yeah.
scary and exciting.
I can definitely relate, but I have to say that I think maybe we should also demystify this. You know, we've created the society is created around this, right? I mean, you go to school from 9 to 5, you know where you're going, you always plan to what's going next. You have this, you say, security that we build around ourselves. But what is the worst that could happen? I mean, I remember it was a very difficult decision, but then you take a step back and you're like, okay, so if it doesn't work, well, I found a new job. I mean, I'm still an engineer. I'm still in a very great and developed country. It's fine. I mean, you can take the risk, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. It's not going to
That's
be the end
true.
of your life.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Mm.
actually another personal note from me. I got married quite young, so I didn't start a company young, but I got married when I was 24 and engaged only after, like, I don't know, 2 months of dating. So we were
Oh,
silly and
wow.
naive back then. Luckily it works out. Next week we're going to have a 20th anniversary, so it did work
Congratulations.
out, but to make the decisions, I really struggled for a while, like, can I get married already after being engaged? Like, is this really, am I doing a stupid thing? Like, how can I promise something like this to another person, and what if it doesn't work out and all that? But I really went through this mind game, like, okay, what happens? So, we start hating each other, and then we end up having a divorce, and went through this painful uh, experiment in my head, like, what's it going to be like? Then I'm like, it's going to be okay in that case as well. So, there are solutions. If the marriage doesn't work, you can get a divorce nowadays. So it's not that big of a risk. It might seem like worse than it really is in reality. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that doesn't work with this way of thinking is having children, right?
Yeah, you can't
No.
give them back. Or it's very frowned upon.
Yeah.
True. But luckily, nature quite often takes care of that. So even if it was the worst decision you ever made, you're never going to think that way. Again, speaking from experience, I
Mm.
suppose. Okay, I know that Ave has to be somewhere else in a few minutes only. Did you have a last question, Ave, before I talk us out of this podcast?
I think I'm happy with everything I've heard. Thanks so much.
All right. I'm going to ask our final question, our branded final questions to the future maker here. So, Chloe, 10 years from now, what will the world look like?
I thought a lot about this question, and to be honest, if I knew, wouldn't that be, a shame to know what the world is going to be like in 10 years? I mean, there's no surprise behind that.
Hmm.
No, to answer your question, I don't know, and I don't want to know. And I think if I've learned something from my past, I know only 25 years of life, that's still young, it's that there is no way of knowing. From one day to the next, you can lose an eye. From one day to the next, you can learn you're going to be a mother. From one day to the next, you can have different emotions. You can be a different person. And the world is the same. I mean, as we said, 10 years back, jobs like mine probably just didn't exist because those
Hmm.
digital platforms didn't exist. So who am I to know how world is going to be in 10 years? I don't know. Probably my kid, who is not even bored, would know more than I do because he doesn't have the experience and all the data that I've already accumulated about how the world is now. So in 10 years, I don't know how the world will be, but if I can make a wish, I don't know, I know that's not your question, but if I can make a wish, I hope it's a better world than it is today, even better. That science communication is done by everyone, and that we have science influencers everywhere making the world better, and that we can stop the saying that the next generation is going to face the challenges of tomorrow because we'll all be facing them together.
That's a very lovely wish. Thank you, Chloe. And that's the end of it. This was Chloé Carrière. Thank you, Chloe. It was a pleasure having you here.
It was a pleasure to be here with you too. Thank you so much for the invitation.
And to our listeners, if you like hearing stories from people who make the world a better place through science and technology, you're in luck because there's more. So make sure to subscribe to the Future Makers podcast, for example, on Spotify. Until next time.